Good morning, church family. I hope you had a great week this week. A wet but a wonderful week. It's very good. Today we are going to look at a special topic you'll see in your church bulletins that I've entitled the sermon this week. Look up and live. You know what? Some of us have computers, and we recognize that the cursor that you hold, the mouse, can only do one thing at a time. And we can only focus on one point of reference in our minds at any one time. And so that's why I've encouraged you this morning. I want to encourage you to think about using your mouse, your cursor in your mind, to look up, because when we look up, we have a wonderful opportunity to live. We have, this monitor down here is not telling the true picture about what's happening behind me. So that's good. I've got a weak or no signal here. So this morning we're going to talk to everyone. However, I want to specifically address my comments this morning to those of you who may have had a hard week, who may have even had a hard month or a hard life, who are going through a tough time. Maybe you're teetering on the brink of decision making about whether or not to do some things that you feel God is encouraging you to do in your life. So I particularly want to bear you in mind and speak to you this morning. There are some wonderful words of encouragement throughout the Bible, asking us to do this very thing, to look up, to live. And that's what Jesus wants for us today. Let us bow our heads together and we'll just invite His Spirit to join us this morning. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this glorious Sabbath morning. I praise you for your mighty power. And I want to speak words from on high this morning. And you know that I'm just an ordinary guy, and I don't have a lot of good ideas myself. And so I plead with your Spirit to pour your power down on me this morning so that you can speak through me and touch people's hearts and fill their minds with things which will lift them above this world so that they will focus on you and they will turn their attention to Jesus. They will listen to your voice so that you can bless them, and they will be a glory and a wonderful blessing to those in their circle of influence. So please join us now and help me to speak words from your throne in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's see if this is going to... Yes, we are. We're talking. Okay. When we focus and look up, good things happen inside of us. Things that would never happen quite the same unless we looked up. You know, when we are exuding life and energy, this little piece of wire here is having a hard time staying on my head, but that's all right. Of course, it has nothing to do with my unruly hair, so don't you go getting ideas about that. Happiness explodes inside of us that we would otherwise not have. And so there's a great depth of goodness, and we have a sense of purpose when we know we're on track and we're moving along the path that God would have us move on. We have an energy and a power behind us. And even although the road might be bumpy and it might be rocky, we are driven somehow and we're motivated and we just force through because we've got that power from on high. We have an inner peace. No matter what's going on in the turbulent, noisy world around us, we have a sense of grace and peace and joy inside of us. When we look up, some really wonderful things, some great things start happening with the way we allocate our time, the way we spend our money. Good things happen into our family, things that wouldn't otherwise happen. And some of the bad stuff, things falling apart, start to get put back together. the more we turn our eyes on Jesus, the better things happen inside our heart. In fact, great things happen in our lives when we completely turn our lives over to our God. Do you know? When we are looking to Jesus, He will never, ever turn His face away from us. I'll just say that again. When we are looking to Jesus, He will never turn His face away from us. What a wonderful reassurance that is. We're told that we must look for God, not just passively wait, like a blob just waiting for God to seek us out. We're told to search for Him. There's many verses like this. You'll seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. So if the quality of your life is a bit shaky sometimes, if you're not really living life to the full, or as Jesus said, He came to give us life more abundantly, or the very best quality of life, life to the full, well, think about where your heart is at. What's creeping in and sharing and taking too much of your time, too much of your heart, too much of your money? Have we got a partial shared commitment? It's time again to look up and live, to seek God and find Him. And we're promised that we will find Him when we search for Him with all of our heart. We're going to have a little neurophysiology now. You'll see there that we've got a couple of different pictures of the brain, this cauliflower thing here. And most of you would be familiar with some of these titles here. And this is the top. Often we have the music center at the front here, and reasoning, higher powered for understanding and analysis and so on. And various parts of the top of our brain here, they have this cognitive functioning, the function of thinking ability to reason things through. You see we have the frontal lobe, the parietal, temporal just in front of the ears there and around the ears, and the occipital lobe at the back. But today I want to focus just a little bit about this particular system here. You see there's 6 funny names there, and they make up what's called the limbic system. And I want to just look about what happens in our heads as we are making decisions. Because sometimes, you know, when our cursor, our little mouse, is going off the side of the computer and we can't bring it back to the text, it's a very frustrating thing. And this can happen in our lives if we start listening too much to the limbic system and trying to use the limbic system for something that it wasn't designed for. That is some of the reasoning and the cognitive functions that really should be for the upper part of the brain. So there's a lot of different functions of the limbic system, and we're just going to look at the 4 main ones just now very quickly so you understand why it's not good to let this limbic system take over with important decision making in your life. The first that we're going to talk about is emotions. So if you feel pain, if you're frightened and you have fear and you're scared about something, this is being generated. This feeling you get is generated by the limbic system. If you have some feelings of pleasure and happiness and joy, these feelings are generated by the limbic system. This is the emotional function of the limbic system. It also has the function of memory. Put your hand up if you remember where you were when you heard that Princess Diana was killed in a motor vehicle accident in Paris. Now, we'll be really uncruel. We'll be cruel now. You ready for a limbic system to kick in with the emotional things when I'm going to be cruel to you? Put your hand up again if you remember where you were when President John Kennedy was assassinated in America. Now, see how cruel I am? Have a look around and see who the old people are in the church. I can remember someone in our church camp in Taranaki, New Zealand, must have been listening to the radio on Sabbath morning, because 10 o'clock in the morning they came and announced that President John Kennedy was killed. I was 14 years of age, and I can still remember where the tents were and the trees at the back down towards Opunake and Taranaki. I can remember this. Why is that? Because the limbic system is responsible for the memory, and it's also responsible for our emotions. And when I think, wow, the President of the United States has been assassinated, this was an emotional experience for me. When Princess Diana was killed, this is emotional. You remember it because the limbic system is also responsible for your memory. And, if you come and talk to me later and you say, my name is Bert, and I'll start talking to you about something, and then I'll say, sorry, what, your name again, what was that? And you'll say, oh, it was Bert. And then by the time I get to the third time and I've got to ask you again, you'll be thinking, what is wrong with this guy? I've told him 3 times what my name is and he still can't remember it. You're not going to get a good feeling about me, are you? So that's because I'm thinking about what I'm going to talk about, and this name of yours goes in this ear, straight through the hollow pipe and out the other ear. Do I have the capacity to remember your name? I'm not making an emotional thing of it, you see. I'm not putting enough value on meeting you. I'm wanting to talk to you and engage with you, sure. I value you. But your name is sort of not important in my head. And so it goes straight through. And unless I say, I need to know this person's name, and I'm going to think about their name, and I will remember it, because it makes them feel important. When I remember their name, then I will remember. Do I have the capacity to remember someone's name? I do, apparently, because on 2 occasions in my life, I've had a classroom of 30 students that I've had to take responsibility for. 30 students. A bit scary for a young guy, because it happened when I was, well, it wasn't so long ago, but it was when I was young, see? And with a classroom of 30 students, in 24 hours, I learnt all their names, so I could walk around the classroom and talk and ask them questions. So I know my brain can do it. It's just a matter of triggering the emotional connection to the memory for the limbic system. Another function is motivation, you see. If the lion is about to bite me, I'm going to run. I'm frightened. That's a function of the limbic system. I'm motivated to run. Sometimes when our boys were learning their musical instruments, we used to put some unhealthy food on the corner of the piano, and they knew when they did their music practice, they could eat some of this unhealthy food. Don't you go telling people around the conference office about that, will you? But it was motivation, something to encourage. You see, and it's important to understand what drives us, what motivates us. And so that's why I'm talking a little bit about motivation, because the limbic system, because we need to know what the drivers are, what's going to help us to finish a job that we might take on, because this is all very important to our spiritual journey. The final function of the limbic system that I want to talk about today are these autonomic processes. These are things that happen without us actually thinking about it. You know, we have eyes and ears and taste buds and taste and smell, all of these senses, and the information that is from the outside goes directly in through the limbic system, and it's processed in the limbic system. It's very important because when something frightening is going to happen, my body needs to act quickly. You know, sometimes something will happen and you might save your hand from being burnt on the stove because you've got an autonomic nervous system, which is an automatic thing. Your hand comes back. Did you think about it? No, it was burning hot and you pulled your hand back before you even thought about it. And so it's important to understand the limbic system because it has implications for our spiritual journey. Now, the higher part of the brain, so this is, sometimes there's a parallel between, we talk about the baser emotions that drive us, or we talk about the lower kind of makeup of our being. We talk about the higher order. And so we're going to now think a little bit about the higher part of the brain, and we've already talked about some of the functions of cognitive functions of the higher part of the brain. It's important to understand because the brain knows, the limbic system knows that the higher ordered thinking is superior in decision making. than the limbic system, the sort of decisions that can be made when we burn our hand on a hot stove. That's an automatic process. It's the autonomic system kicking in, and it's going to save us in many situations of an emergency. But unfortunately, the limbic system only has the decision-making capacity of a 2-year-old. So you think, if you're running the household, how many decisions would you let this 2-year-old in your house make to run the household? Would you let the 2-year-old drive the car? Would you let the 2-year-old get on the computer and pay some of those accounts that keep coming in? I don't think so. But often we let the 2-year-old limbic system make some very important decisions in our life that have implications for the spiritual world that we live in and also the physical world we live in. And so the limbic system is down there listening in to hear what sort of talk is going on upstairs in the thinking part of the brain, because the 2-year-old wants to know, how am I going to make this person feel? Is this going to be scary? Or is this good news? What should I be feeling right now? And so the 2-year-old's listening in to hear what's going on in the cognitive part of the brain. And so if in your thinking part of the brain, you're thinking about the events of life, or you get a bill in the mail, as we've seen, as we're looking here in this picture, see? He's looking at this bill, and he's thinking, man, I thought I'd paid this. It's overdue. And now he starts talking to himself in the thinking, reasoning part of the brain. And the 2-year-old limbic is listening in downstairs. And so when the thinking part of the brain starts giving negative talk down, the limbic system says, oh boy, we're in trouble. I can hear what's going on up there. And you're saying, oh, this is bad. I'm useless. I'm really in trouble now. I haven't got the money for this bill. Things always go, this is the worst thing. I couldn't imagine. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I needed the money for this weekend. And so the 2-year-old's thinking, man, this is bad. We're in trouble here. What are we going to do now? And so then all the adrenaline starts rushing in, because this is the autonomic processes. The adrenaline's getting pumped into the bloodstream. So you start feeling really bad. And it's because the 2-year-old is listening in to what's going on upstairs. However, because the 2-year-old is listening, you can adopt a more positive attitude. And you can get up in the morning and you can say, I feel great. This is good. You go to get the mail, you got the bill, and you think, forgot to pay that one? No worries, I'll ring them up and I'll pay them in a fortnight's time when my next pay comes in. And you say, I just love this. It's great. It's an excellent day. We needed this rain. Yes, we haven't had rain, since yesterday. And something good is going to happen because of this rain, I'm sure. Wow, I can't wait to see some more rain tomorrow. And so you can tell your limbic system some good messages. And then, of course, you'll start feeling great. And when these good things, these good feelings happen, your endorphins go up and your overall health is improved and you start feeling great and on charge. You feel senses of joy and peacefulness surging through you, and the vitality and the zing comes back into your life. And so we are told to put good things in our mind. The food that we give our mind, remember the 2-year-old is listening, and when we put good things into our mind, things that are true, noble, right, things that are correct, pure, beautiful, lovely things, things which are excellent and worthy of a praise. Even when I read these words, I start to feel good. There's something wonderful about just thinking even about the meaning of one word after another like this. These words are going into my conscious, my thinking brain. The 2-year-old's listening in, and I start to feel, life is good. And I know God backs these promises up, and so I can trust this promise. And I'm not scared, I'm not afraid. And so the limbic's settling down saying, all right, let the joy come, let the happiness come. And it tends to come all by itself. Like sleep, you try to force it, nothing doing. But you just wait and let it come by itself. So, if you can read this, at the top there. I did it in black because it's sort of negative. So I've written here, in case you can't read it, a sense of dread or foreboding. You know, sometimes you can't put your finger on it. You just have some sort of an inner terror creeping in, and you think, oh, I just got a bad feeling. And so what can we do about that? We can use our reasoning center of our brain and say, that's what it is. There's going to be an exam at the end of the week, and I haven't been studying. So we can make some decisions around that. But we might just feel a bit uneasy, and we have this sense of foreboding, and we think, no, there's no reason for this. I'm not going to feel bad because there's nothing doing there. It was just something that came from nowhere. And we can choose what information we feed down to our 2-year-old who's listening, and we will feel a whole lot better. You see, this amazing strength comes when we look up. We look up to our God, we listen to His voice, and we just follow His instructions for the day, and the good feelings will follow. You know, I can remember this verse from my childhood. My dad had a set of slides, and he used to show it to us sometimes on a Friday night. And this was a shocking thing for me to remember this verse. In the last days, do you think we're in the last days? Put your hand up. A lot of you think we're in the last days. Men, of course, women probably not excluded. I don't know, do you think they're included? I won't ask that, it's not a fair question. No gender questions today. Men will be lovers of themselves. Do you know anyone who really loves themselves? And pretty much everything they do is just for them? Boasters, people who are proud, arrogant, blaspheming, using God's name in vain, disobedient to their parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good. If you try to do something good, do they mock you and poke fun at you? Traitors, headstrong, who just not flexible or not sharing or not compromising. Haughty people, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. This is a scary one. See, probably during the week, not many of us would have been doing some of these things above. But what about this bottom one? Having a form of godliness, but denying its power. You see, God has amazing amounts of power that He wants to share with us. And we can go through all the motions of reading our Sabbath school lesson, coming along to church, looking like a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, but not having God's power in our life. And these people do a lot of damage, because when push comes to shove and they're under stress, they don't behave as you would expect a godly Christian to behave. And then it's all spilt out. And this is the scary thing, because Satan, he's happy for us to go through the motions, but he doesn't want us to have God's power in our lives. I want to share just a little section here from Oswald Chambers. Some of you might have been enjoying his daily worship readings. This is a devotional that's available in the ABC. And he says here that sometimes in a crisis will either improve us or it will make us worse, depending on whether we're denying God's godliness, God's power in our lives. Listen to this. The things we are going through, this is some sort of crisis or trouble in our life, they either make us sweeter, better, nobler men and women, or they are making us more quibbling and fault-finding, more insistent on our own way. The things that happen either make us fiends or they make us saints. It depends entirely upon our personal relationship with our God. So when we look up, God is glorified. We honor God by looking up. And when we look up and we surrender and invite God's Spirit into our lives, then these wonderful things happen. These 9 fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And Paul says there's no law against any of these things. I made a little card up here for you, and I'll give them to the deacons. And so as you go out of the church today, I want you to think about taking one of these little cards, and on it, it's quite simple. It's a self-assessment, and those 9 fruits of the spirits are listed down here, and there's another column. And I want you just to take it home and just to do a little bit of a self-appraisal and think about, how loving am I? How much joy and happiness do I have in my life? How peaceful am I? Am I at peace with myself and with my family, with my workmates and schoolmates and so on? And then just score yourself here on this column, 1 to 10. And if you get, when you've scored them all, if you get 100, then I want you to come and make an appointment and come and talk to me in the conference office. There's only 9 after all. Okay, in Philippians we read, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose." You know, it's so hard to do all of these things. We can't be loving all the time by ourselves. We can't be joyful and happy all the time by ourselves. We can't always feel peaceful. We can't always be patient. And thank goodness, which is another word for God's Holy Spirit, thank goodness that we don't have to try. It's not hard work because we invite God into our lives, we surrender the old life that we had, and then all these good things start bubbling out of us, start oozing out of us, and we radiate to all the people in our circle of influence, all these good things here that we're looking at. Now, I want you to open your Bibles with me to Deuteronomy. This is a wonderful verse. You know, if you look up a verse and you like it in the New Testament and it's quoting an Old Testament Bible verse, you can betcha that it's also going to be a wonderful verse for us today. Because the apostles in the early New Testament, they took some of these Bible promises and they applied them to their lives, and they were given doses of God's power through these wonderful old verses. So I just want to look at these 2 verses, verse 6 and verse 8. "Be strong and courageous." You see, when God's backing us up, we've got nothing to be afraid of. "Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." He will never leave you nor forsake you. What a wonderful promise that is. And in verse 8, "The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." So when you're talking things over to yourself, and when in your mind you're reasoning things out, remember your 2-year-old limbic system is listening. If you want to feel great, you've got to send some very good messages down to the limbic system. So the emotions, the good emotions will kick in, and then the endorphins will flow, and you'll be feeling great. Also, there's another one there you can turn over to, but we won't come to it right away. I just want to share something with you. A true story happened last Sunday night. You know, we had a prayer this morning. Pastor David shared this wonderful prayer on all the people in our lives. You think of the circles of influence that all of the people from Penrith church family here, when they all go to their homes, their workplaces, their schools, what a tremendous light on a hill it is for our God. And this story that I'm going to share with you comes from a lady called Anna. And on Sunday night, Anna was on her knees praying. She was praying for many things. She spent a lot of time praying after she was reading the Bible. And then she started thinking about one of the ladies in her church. This lady had married a non-Adventist lady. See, you are listening. That's good. So this lady's husband was not an Adventist, but she used to bring her children along to church. She brought her children along to church, and then a sad thing happened. This lady's husband, he ran off with another young lady. And so the lady was coming to church with her children, and she was in a terrible mess emotionally, because her marriage was looking like it was over, and her husband was unfaithful to her, and he had gone. And so this lady, Anna, was on her knees, and she thought about the people in her church family, and she was praying for this lady. You know, when we pray for each other, the wonderful power that the church has when the church is united together in a prayer, you can't measure this. Remember that wonderful quote from Ellen White: "There's no limit to the usefulness of one who, setting self aside, just wholeheartedly works in with God." And so when the whole church family is praying, it's the most wonderful thing, and God can bless. And so we have Anna on her knees, and now it's approaching midnight, and she prays for this lady who may well be a solo mother with these children, and the struggle that it will be for her, bringing her children to Jesus, bringing them to church faithfully, thinking about this. And she was praying and pouring her heart out. 12 o'clock midnight, her phone rang, and she's thinking, who would ring me at 12 o'clock in the middle of the night? What is going on? Somebody has died, perhaps. And so she scrambled to her feet, and she went and picked up the phone, and she said, "Yes, hello." And it was a man's voice on the phone. And he introduced himself, and he said, "I am the husband of this Adventist lady whose children come to church." Anna was praying for this lady and the crisis in her marriage. And the man was in his house a long way away, and he had never spoken to Anna in his life before. And so Anna didn't know him. He had to introduce himself, and he said, "When I was with my wife," he said, "my wife used to go to church, and so," he said, "I got the number of the church pastor out of her mobile phone before I ran away with my girlfriend." And he said, "I have this number." And he said, "You are the church pastor. You are the church pastor." And she said, "Yes, I am." And so he said, he said, "Tonight, my girlfriend and me, we are fighting. We are swearing at each other angrily. We have been fighting." And he said, "I don't know what to do. I'm in trouble. I don't know what to do." You see, when we use our eyes and our ears and our senses, our hands and our feet, and we surrender them to God, then God can use us in a powerful way to help to bring people together again. And so Anna spoke to this gentleman that she had never met, and he said, "I have a Catholic background," and he said, "I believe in God." And he said, "What should I do? What should I do?" And so Anna will now try to work a reconciliation to try and put this family back together again. You see, this gentleman, he was married. He had children. He had a wife. He had a life, an orderly life, a God-ordained family life. And yet something in the 2-year-old in his head said, "That is a beautiful woman there. I want to grab her. I want to run away with her. I want to forget about my duties and my responsibilities with my family." Do you think he was reasoning it through using the cognitive higher order of the brain, or do you think he was using the base elements of the mind, allowing this to motivate him? And so he's lusting after this woman and he's running away with it. You see, this is what happens if we allow the 2-year-old to take control of our life, and we're reacting impulsively, and we do things on the spur of the moment. The automatic nervous system, we get used to listening to the things it's telling us to do, and so we make some stupid blunders in our life, and they cause us a lot of pain. They hurt a lot of other people. And so this man, now he was sorry, and now he will have a great difficulty. Will his wife accept him back after he's been away with somebody else? It's a real struggle. You see the mess that Satan, he loves to get us tied up in a mess like this. And The only way to save us from all this trouble is when we turn our eyes upon Jesus. We look up and we live. I want you now to turn over with me to this other verse in Matthew 7. Matthew 7. And again, it's two split verses here. In verse 7, ask and it will be given to you. Have you been asking God lately? What is it that you've been asking God lately? When you've been asking God lately, what has He been doing for you? Are you asking and forgetting to listen for His response? It says, seek and you will find. Where are you turning your attention to in your life? What are you thinking about? What sort of inputs are going into your cognitive thinking brain? Because whatever we seek, we will find it. So we need to get the mouse and get the cursor in control and make a careful, deliberate decision to take action. We'll go searching, and when we search with all of our heart, we are promised that we will find our God. We're also told to knock, and it will be opened to you. You see, it's not just passive, waiting to see what happens in my life. We are to go knocking, because some of those doors that we knock on, they will remain closed if we're surrendered to God. But some of those other doors, when we knock, they will open, and there will be opportunities that we never dreamed of. You see, God's plans are higher than our plans. His dreams are beyond anything we can imagine. In Ephesians 20, we read that God is able to do far more than we would ever dare to ask or even dream of, infinitely beyond our highest prayers, desires, thoughts, our hopes. How much can you dream of? How much can you think about? Well, God can do more than that, much more than you ever imagined. In Jeremiah 29:11, we read that I know what I'm planning for you. This is God speaking. I have good plans for you, not plans to hurt you, and I'll give you hope and a good future. What a mighty God, and how much He loves us. How desperate He is for us. In 1 Corinthians 2:9 we read, no mere man has ever seen, heard, or even imagined what wonderful things God has ready for those who love Him. God already has wonderful things planned for us. And you know what? Sadly, I think many of us are going to miss out on this earth with the wonderful gifts and surprises that God has got in store for us. Because we listen to the 2-year-old in our head too often. And the 2-year-old takes us some crazy places, and we do some crazy things. But when God calls us again, and you know, when He talks about and defines who He is, He says that He is a long-suffering God, a very patient God. So we don't have to despair, no matter what our past has been. Every day is a new day with our God. He's a mighty God. We can jump off into His arms. He will catch us when we leap off the cliff. We can trust Him with everything we've got, and we won't be sorry, because He has good plans for us. Just stay connected. So it's not the 2-year-old that we'll be obeying, but it's thinking things through and inviting God's Spirit into our life so that we will hear His voice and we will follow the road that He's left for us open. We're told to keep our wants, our joys, our sorrows and cares and fears before God, because He doesn't get tired. I love that. No matter how much I ask, it's not going to burden or weary Him. Nothing that in any way upsets me is going to be too small for Him to notice. How much He loves us. What a wonderful reassurance this is. And we're told that we should look up, because God's ideal for His children is higher than the highest human thought can possibly reach. Look up and live. Really live. God bless you all.